Hello, glad you could join me. As you know, the table saw is probably one of the most useful tools in your shop. But if you've ever tried to cut a sheet of plywood on your table saw, it's fairly awkward to do and it's really dangerous. A cut-off box or a cut-off sled makes things a lot easier, and we're going to discuss how to build one of these today. I'm going to build a smaller one. I've already got a large one, so I don't really need to build another one this large. You'll notice I've got a couple of removable slides here. That's to catch the cut-off sled, and I can pull it all the way back and lay a sheet of plywood in this and cross-cut it without any problem. It can do many other things. You can nail strips of wood onto the cut-off box to use as guides, cut really different angles. It's just really a useful item. And I've got a really good way to construct one of these sleds. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of it and makes them extremely accurate. So let's get on with it. Okay, the first step to building a cut-off sled is planing down some hardwood. It can be maple, it can be oak, white oak, red oak, just as long as it's a good hard wood, so it fits snugly in the miter slots. Of course, you don't want it real tight, but you want it snug. It needs to be a good dry wood too. Okay, next thing you want to do is select a good piece of cabinet plywood about a 1/2 inch thick. Decide what size you want to make your cut-off box. Like I said, I'm going to make this one kind of small. I'm going to make it 3 feet wide and able to cut 2 feet deep. To get that 2 feet depth, I made it 32 inches this way. And that'll be clear later why I did that. So first thing I want to do is cut it right in half. So I'll set my fence at 18 inches and we'll cut this in half. Okay, for the next step, we want to drop the blade and put this sheet of plywood about a 1/4 inch over the top of the blade. Take a pencil and mark where the miter slot is. Okay, do the same thing on the other one. Overlap the blade by about a 1/4 inch. Mark where the miter slot is. 2 marks. The next step is to cut a slot for your oak runners. I'm going to do it with a router table, but you could use a dado blade just as well. You just have to have a good snug fit. One thing to be aware of, if you're doing like me, I'm using the table saw fence as a guide. This type of table saw fence is not solid on this outfeed side, so I screwed a piece of wood to my outfeed table. So I'm ready to make the first cut on this. Okay, what we need to do here is measure how thick we want to make our oak runners. To do that, I used a square and I dropped it down until it hit the bottom of the slot. And you line it up just like that and take a measurement. And I'm showing about 5/8 of an inch. But we don't need it a full 5/8 because that means dirt will get underneath your runner and affect how it slides in the saw. So I'm going to go for a 1/2 inch. That'll give me an 1/8 inch clearance on the bottom of the runner, and that should be just what we need. looks like I'm a little bit snug on these miter slots. I mean, I can push it through there, but it needs to slide freely. So, unfortunately, it's manual labor. Gotta sand it down a little bit. Okay, after quite a bit of sanding, I got that really smooth in that spot. Now we're going to glue the runners into the plywood. Mechanical fasteners really shouldn't be necessary. The slot is going to hold the runner pretty good. Put enough to get good adhesion, but not enough to squeeze out. I know that's kind of a tricky thing to do, but yeah, I got a little squeeze out. That'll be all right. I've got some weight here I'm going to use to just whatever's on hand. Make sure it's down in the slot good. Okay, the glue is dried and we're ready for the next step. It's starting to take shape now. Using the miter slots, you trim the edges of your cutoff sled. Okay, it's starting to take shape now. Here's the basic cutoff box. Of course, it needs a fence on the front and the back. What I've done here is I've ripped a couple of sheets of 3/4 inch plywood, just about the cheapest I could find. And here's a piece of oak. I've jointed the edges, made it real straight, as straight as possible anyway. We're most concerned about this edge right here. What we're going to do is laminate these together. This will be attached to the back of the cutoff box, and this will be on top of it to make it rigid. First thing I'm going to do is laminate our plywood. It's good to have a good flat surface. I know you don't want to get your glue on your table saw, but here's a trick that will help you. If you've got a nail gun, you can hold it square, put one nail in it. One nail on each end. Now I'm going to use my table saw to clamp it to, and this will ensure that it's fairly flat. Won't be perfect, but it'll be really close. Okay, we have both our fences glued up now, and I'll take one pass on the joiner to smooth that up. Okay, we have the laminated plywood fence here. I've rounded the corners a little bit. This will be the bottom where we glue the oak fence to. I've pre-drilled the oak base with screws to help in assembly. Make sure that it's flush with the edge of the you want to make sure that it's good and flush all the way across. This is absolutely straight. I've jointed it several times. And the plywood will make an L-shaped structure which will hold the plywood straight. Alright, there it is. Next step will be to attach that to our cutoff sled. Okay, we've probably reached the most critical step in this cutoff sled, and that's attaching the back fence. And the reason it's so critical is it needs to be absolutely square. I've drilled 4 pilot holes in the back here, 2 on each half of our cutoff sled. And I'll use them to temporarily attach this fence after I get it square. I've got my carpenter square here. And you line it up with the slot that the blade is running in. And then clamp it to the cutoff box. Okay, it's a good idea to flip the square over and do the other half of the fence. That way, if your square is not exactly square, you'll see it. Which mine's been dropped several times. I'm sure it's not absolute. Yeah, it looks pretty good right there. You got to have the back of the box hanging off your saw a little bit to be able to get clamps underneath it. And once you think you got it square, lock it down pretty good. I'm going to double check it again. Looks good. Looks good. Now with it locked down, you want to secure it with screws. These screws are just long enough to where they won't come through the other side. Okay. Double check it with the square again. Looking good, looking good. Looks great. Now we can take the clamps off and make some test cuts to check for square. We're going to make a test cut on our cutoff sled to make sure we got it square. To do this, you can start out with a piece of wood, a scrap piece of wood, one edge good and straight. Make one cut. Flip it over, then cut off about a 1-inch strip. Now, if this strip is parallel, 1 1/16, 1 1/16. Dead on. That means our cutoff box is square. Okay, we've made several test cuts on the cutoff box and we know it's square. And that's what we want. Now, just to stop anything from moving, we want to clamp our fence. I've got some temporary screws in there, but we don't want to take any chances on it moving. I'd say about 4 clamps would be enough. Now, what we're going to do is flip it over. We're going to put screws on the bottom across here. And we're going to put quite a few because we don't want it to move and there's no glue holding it. removed the top screws we had temporarily holding the fence. All we like now is attaching the back fence. The square on the back fence is not really critical. Just line it up with the back of the cut-off box and you'll be fine. Well, there you have it, a completed cut-off sled. I've attached the back fence and put some paste wax on the runners. Slides really well in the miter slots, and I'm sure it'll be a valuable addition to your workshop.